Hey everybody, welcome. It's Thursday. It's time for the Monster Workshop stream. How are y'all doing? Just give the stream a second to catch up as usual. Welcome everybody. It is cold where I am right now. Not really cold. Not cold in a way that anyone else in the world would think that it's cold, but cold in the way that someone who used to live in a cold place and now lives in a warm place thinks it's cold. You know? Hey, what's up, David? Thanks for coming. Yeah. So I'm wrapped up with a blanket like FDR, like I've got polio, and I'm sitting here. I've got a tall glass of cold water, not helping, not very helpful. I should have made some tea, is what I should have done, but that is okay. Welcome everybody. It's time to redesign a monster. It's unseasonably warm there in Chicago, says David. In Chicago, boy, I am about to be in your neck of the woods. Not in Chicago. Hey, what's up, Grant? Yeah, it's not cold. It's not cold even a little bit. I'm about to be in your neck of the woods, David. Ish. I'm going back to the Midwest in January for a couple of weeks, so I'm about to be like thrown back into, the frigid ice age conditions of central Minnesota for a couple of weeks, and that's going to be a shock to my system, let me tell you what, because I am already so cold all the time. Great, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about my weak-willed constitution, right? My negative constitution score. No, instead, we are talking about Carrion Crawler, a monster with a good constitution, 16 constitution, in fact. If you're just tuning in, this is the Monster Workshop stream where we take a monster from 5th edition and we kind of overhaul it and redesign it to make it a little bit more fun and interesting to run in combat. It is kind of the partner stream with our podcast, which is called Monster of the Week. You can check it out up above. David says 3 feet of snow should be waiting for you. Yeah, that's what I'm anticipating. I don't have any snow gear anymore, so I'm going to go out there in my stupid California bullshit, and I'm going to freeze to death. But if you haven't checked out our podcast, please do. It's called Monster of the Week. You can find it pretty much wherever podcasts are available. And we do a similar thing where week by week we break down each one of the different monsters in the Monster Manual, going alphabetically and talking about what's cool and what's less cool about them. Grant says, checking in from Wyoming, I laugh at the whole rest of the country, barring Alaska. Yeah, Minnesota gets pretty cold. It gets pretty cold there. I think most of the states, like north of the Mason-Dixon, can brag about having cold winters. I think that's generally true. But yeah, it's hard to top Alaska. It's definitely hard to do that. Today might be a bit of a shorter episode because I think the Carrion Crawler, one thing that I was struck by when I was doing the podcast is just how simple of a monster it is. There's just not a lot here, and I think that's kind of one of its strengths, right? I talk about this more in the show, but the idea that the Carrion Crawler kind of plays on our sort of human fears of insects, particularly I think roaches, right? The idea of like scampering insects that get into your food and are like hiding in cracks and crevices where you can't find them. I think that's kind of the terror that the Carrion Crawler is playing on. And kind of like the roaches, how they're sort of timeless, right? They can survive anything. I think the Carrion Crawler has a similar kind of survivability across all the different editions of D&D. It really has been the same pretty much since 1st edition with almost no real changes. The only thing that 5e does really differently than previous editions is the art, which you can see, I think, to my left. Am I pointing the right way? I don't have my thing up. I'm going to check and see which way is the art. If I go this way, no, it's this way. Check it out, right? Check out the Carrion Crawler over there. That's the only thing that really changed in 5th edition, and I actually really like this new art because I think it's way creepier, right? I think there is something about the kind of like earwig coloration that they do for it that makes it a lot scarier because it's a lot more like a real bug. In 3rd and 4th edition, it had this kind of crazy like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle kind of bright green like toxic sludge color, which it's cool. I have fondness for it, but I think that the new art is much creepier. So today we're going to break down the 3 things that I don't like so much about the 5th edition Carrion Crawler, and we're going to talk about some solutions. Like I say, probably going to be a shorter episode, but we might, depending on how long it takes, we might make an alternate version of the crawler as well. because what I usually do is I package these monsters up for Patreon. So if you're a $1 patron, every Sunday, excuse me, I said Friday, every Sunday you get access to whichever monster we designed on Thursday, in a nice little PDF that's got, you know, some new lore usually and some new stats. And I like to add some stuff into that stat block that is stuff we don't go over here on the podcast or on the stream, just to help, you know, give a little bit of extra value to the patrons. So we might talk about, you know, what a variant version of the crawler is. But let's go through these problems first and talk about what we can do. So the first one is basically a lore problem. I think that one thing I never understood about the Carrion Crawler across the various editions of D&D is the lore is kind of unclear about the kind of danger that the Carrion Crawler presents to the players. You know, they're called Carrion Crawlers, and they're described as being, you know, going after sort of rotten meat, but they're also then depicted as being predators and called ambush predators. There's like one line at the end of the Carrion Crawler stat block that talks about how, like, they kill their prey, but then they just, like, let it age. You know, once it's like rotted a little bit, once it's decomposed, then they can eat it, which is interesting. But I kind of feel like it misses the point of the Carrion Crawler. There are so many monsters in Dungeons and Dragons that just like hunt and eat humanoids, right? Like dozens of them. The thing that makes the Carrion Crawler unique is that it is a scavenger, right? Or that it's like explicitly a scavenger before it's a predator. So saying that it eats like carrion, but also it will eat a live person if it wants to, right? Like, okay, but then it might as well just be a regular crawler, right? It doesn't necessarily have carrion attached. So I would do a lore change, and I would say that the Carrion Crawler only eats carrion, right? Like dead meat. It doesn't kill prey. It just eats, yeah, for flavors. That's grand. It just eats things that are already dead, because what that does is it changes the nature of encounters you would have with a Carrion Crawler. Think about it this way: if the party is moving their way through a dungeon and they are killing, you know, fighting monster after monster after monster and leaving kind of a trail of bodies behind them as they go, that's going to attract Carrion Crawlers, right? Who are going to skitter along behind and start dragging away the prey, right? You could even see a scenario where if you get particularly tenacious Carrion Crawlers, right, like you defeat a battle, you kill some monsters, and you're taking a short rest, or you're looting them, or doing whatever, and then Carrion Crawlers appear and interrupt the rest, trying to grab the prey. You could have them be very territorial about it, right? Like, that's a lot of how scavengers work in the wild, is that it's, you know, one predator will kill an animal, and then another predator will come in and try to drive off that predator. Our Carrion Crawlers are different in the sense that, like, they biologically can only eat the flesh of, like, decomposed creatures. But it might be a good justification for how the paralysis works, right? Like, they don't want to kill anything, but they will paralyze their prey if it's kind of on the verge, and then drag it away. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I would basically just I can see a lot of scenarios where either Carrion Crawlers are interrupting a rest, like they're kind of like this weird chaser on the end of an existing combat. It could be a thing where the party is trying to loot the bodies of these people, these monsters that they've slain, right? But the Carrion Crawlers rush in, grab the prey, and drag them off. And the question is, you know, do we chase down the Carrion Crawler to get the good loot? Do we let them go? You know, it gives them a slightly different agenda in a combat that isn't just let's kill and eat player characters, because literally every monster wants to do that. Great. So the second problem then is a more mechanical one, but it's a pretty easy fix. Described as ambush predators, the Crawler has very few stealth abilities. Pretty much the only thing the Carrion Crawler has going for it is that it has spider climb. If it's going to be an ambush predator, if it's going to be like lying in wait, it doesn't have stealth. It has like pretty decent dexterity. It doesn't really have the kind of things that you want it to have. And I really feel like the roach is the touchstone here, right? Like, roach's whole thing is that they can get into little nooks and crannies and crevices. So I would do a few things. I would reduce the size of the Carrion Crawler. I feel like a large crawler is just, it's just too big. Like, this is an insect the size of a horse, right? There's no reason it needs to be that big. It can be medium sized. It can be the size of a person and still be terrifying. Like, think about that. Think about a bug as big as you are. Right? Does it really need to be bigger than you? How is it skittering around? How is it hiding if it's that massive, right? I think a Carrion Crawler could even really realistically be small sized, right? Be like the size of a dog, and still be the most terrifying bug you've ever seen in your life, right? Yeah, Grant says that's so silly since you kind of have to stealth to ambush. Precisely. They've got nothing, and it would be so easy to fix, right? So that's a pretty easy fix to me. I would reduce their size. We'll go down to medium rather than all the way to small, even though I think you could reasonably do a small size carrion crawler. I would maybe bump their dexterity a little bit. I would give them training and stealth, and I think I might give them some version of squeeze, right? Where like they can fight in close quarters or whatever without disadvantage. I wouldn't give them amorphous like an ooze has, but something that means they're really good at getting into cracks and crevices, right? Like a bug. But that doesn't make sense if they're the size of a horse. Way too big. So that's a pretty simple fix. That doesn't take a lot of work. And then my last problem with the carrion crawler is that I want them to have like some kind of a scuttling movement based power, right? Like right now, the crawler basically goes in, it whaps you with the paralytic tentacles. You take a little poison damage. Hopefully you're I almost said paralyzed. Hopefully you're paralyzed, and then the carrion crawler bites you, and it just bites you a bunch of times until the paralysis ends. And the paralysis is pretty serious. Like damage doesn't break you out of it, right? You have to like, keep making the saving throw. But if the carrion crawler's goal is to grab its prey and drag it off, right? Like the tentacles could be a thing that are used on the prey, but I actually kind of think it makes more sense that the tentacles are meant to attack other targets, right? A paralysis effect is a good way to ensure that you aren't chased, right? So the carrion crawler can come in. If there's a dead body and there's a player character looting it, right? It can whap the player character with the tentacles, paralyze them, then do a bite attack against the body, and then drag it off. So I would give it some kind of ability to move away, like whether that's a dash, disengage kind of a thing. I don't love giving monsters just like the same kinds of powers that other creatures have. Like it's fine to do, especially for utility stuff. But I always want them to have like slightly different or slightly unique character or monster traits, right? Things that like, oh, that's how the carrion crawler does this, as opposed to how, you know, the bullet or the basilisk or any other monster we've covered does it, right? But I would also say that I think the bite attack could have a grab component as well, right? Like I thought about the tentacles doing it, but I think the tentacles are much more like feelers or like jellyfish stingers, where it's just about contact. It's not so much about grabbing. I don't think that they're prehensile. But I like the idea that like the bite has like the mandibles can lock, right? So it can bite you and then lock in and then drag the prey away. So I want to give it some kind of a like power. I like calling it skitter, which is a skitter is a great word that you only use in the context of insects. Like other creatures don't skitter, right? Like a squirrel doesn't skitter away; it scampers away. Skitter is specifically like an insectile verb. And then I would attach a grabbing effect to the bite. Again, now most of the time it's going to be using that against, you know, a corpse, against a carcass. But in the rare instance that it is fighting for live prey, you know, that kind of comes in there too. But that's it. I mean, I think for the standard carrion crawler, it really doesn't need much. Like it's a pretty simple monster. So we'll go through this. We'll make those changes. I mean, we're really only like 15 minutes into the stream here. This is what I mean. This might be a really short one. But then we'll take some time, and I want to design a variant crawler or two to see what we can do about that. Great, so let's go in. The lore I'll cover on my own. That's not too hard to do. But we're going to talk about mechanics first, and we'll talk about its stealth abilities. So I use a website called TetraCube, which I really like. If you enjoy the website, please consider supporting them on Ko-Fi. They have a really nice setup for how to make like what I think are really great looking monster stat blocks. So any of the stat blocks that you see here on the stream, or back when I used to do Monster a Day in the Daily Bestiary, that all comes from TetraCube. So please go check them out. So the first thing we're going to do with the carrion crawler is that we're going to reduce its size. We're going to go to medium. Now, one of the problems from that is that that's going to make the hit points go way down. So if you update it, it goes from, if it's large sized, because that's how a 5e does hit points, is based on size. It goes from 51 hit points to 45 hit points. So it's actually not too big of a jump size-wise. So I'm just going to improve this up to 8d8. To keep it at roughly the same level with 60 hit points. Is that right? Is that what it was? It was 6d10. Does that come out to be 60 some? Oh, 51. Okay. So that's even too much. We could go medium hit dice and then go 7 to get kind of, yeah, there you go. So it gets 1 additional hit point if it's medium sized. Great. I'm going to increase its dexterity. to 14. That's going to increase its armor class to 14 as well, and I think that's fine. Like, ostensibly, we could lower the natural armor bonus to keep the AC the same, but I actually don't think it's the end of the world if 14 is the Carrion Crawler's armor class. If it's a little bit more dodgy. Great. I want to give it stealth proficiency. That's pretty easy to do down here. Stealth proficient. Cool. And then we wanted to give it squeeze. So I don't know if squeeze is actually a power anymore. It was a power in some edition of the game. It doesn't seem to be. So I'm gonna look up how amorphous is worded, and we're gonna kind of reword it. Because squeeze is a mechanic, I think, in 5th edition, right? Like, when squeezing X, Y, Z. I'm gonna look up amorphous. Or, you know what? A swarm might be a good touchstone there, because they have similar text, right? Looking up a swarm. Can move through an opening large enough for a tiny bat. Okay. That doesn't really help me because we don't have like a smaller scale version of it. So let's look up an ooze. See how that is worded under the ooze. Obviously, it can't actually ooze, right? It can't actually like slide through an aperture, but I do want to make a point that like while squeezing, you know, it doesn't. Maybe you can make a point that it can squeeze through a space large enough for like a small creature rather than a medium-sized creature. That might be the way I do it. Amorphous can squeeze through a space as narrow as 1 inch wide without squeezing. It can move through a space without squeezing. So yeah, I like that. So let me do this. Let's go back to the swarm and see if we can do like a combo. Something I talk about a lot is that if you're going to write a monster, I think one thing 5th edition does really well is it's got good codified language. You know, like I don't like borrowing abilities if I can help it, but I think sometimes borrowing language is really helpful. The swarm can move through. Okay, the Carrion Crawler can move through any opening large enough for a small creature without squeezing. That's the text. Okay. So it's like literally like a Frankenstein of those two different things. The Carrion Crawler can move through a space narrow enough for a small creature. In Red Book, this encounter often proved fatal. Really? I never played the Red Book. Also, welcome, chat owner. Oh, I said encounter. A small creature without squeezing, and I think that's part of the new design, right? Is that we want to make it like kind of less lethal in a certain way, right? So what do we call that? I guess we could just call it squeeze, but if it's not squeezing, it's weird to call it that, right? I almost want to call it like in the woodwork, but I think that's a little too poetic. It's the idea of like the roach under the fridge, right? Like you turn the lights on and they scatter. So like I don't want squeeze. Skitter is the term it's what we're gonna use for the movement, but it's like yeah, not amorphous. God, what is the word I'm looking for? Damn it. Because I like it being like a trait, right? That it's like, it's not, you know, it's like an adjective. It's a thing that's true about it, right? Rather than it being a thing it can do. It's not, because it's not an action, it's an ability. So like, I don't want to look up amorphous isn't right, but like, agile, like, yeah, you know, like, agile synonym isn't right, but it's something like that. You know, like a word for a creature that can move into narrow spaces. Nimble, lithe, spry, sprightly. Yeah, none of those are quite right. It's got to be. I think like amorphous is closer. Amorphous. It's like an octopus, right? Like an octopus. Yeah, a rat isn't bad. Like an octopus isn't amorphous in the way that like an ooze is amorphous, but they can like. Ooh, I don't mind burrower. Burrower is pretty good. Ooh, do we give them a burrow speed? I don't hate that. Creepy crawler is funny. I think I'm gonna do burrower. I like that. I want to give him a burrow speed. Why the fuck not? We'll give him like a 10-foot burrow speed. Yeah, there you go. They're roaches, right? Little horrible creatures. Okay, so that's an ability then. That goes above Keen Smell and above Spider Climb. Yeah. Bingo bango, hatata. Crevasse Seeker. That's cool. I like Burrower. Okay. Makes 2 attacks, one with the tentacle and one with this bite. So I think we're just gonna put that that grab into the bite. This is what I mean. This is going so fast already. Like we're almost done. The attack is the same, piercing damage, and the target is grabbed. Escape, DC, and what would it be? It would be its strength or dex, so they're basically the same. 8 plus 2 is 10, so 12. Escape DC 12. Yeah, the Carrion Crawler. Checking the DMD Creature Kitchen. Yeah, exactly. The Carrion Crawler can only grab 1 target at a time. Oh, how does the T-Rex has a thing about this, right? That like while it has a creature grabbed, it can't use its bite. It can't bite another target. I think it's something like that. I think that's true for the Carrion Crawler, right? If it's got its jaws locked on you, then it can't bite anyone else. Let's look up the. I think it's the T-Rex. I'm sure a lot of monsters have this, but I'm just gonna go out the T-Rex as one because I don't remember. Till this grapple ends, the target is restrained. Oh, it's grappled now. I keep forgetting when it's grabbed. It used to be grabbed in 4th edition, so it's grappled these days. Target is grappled. Escape DC 12. Do we think that they're restrained? I kind of don't think so. I kind of think they can like kick. They can't move, right, because they're grappled, but I don't think that they're like restrained. Because it's just going to be like a bite on the leg or a bite on the arm, you know? Like, it makes sense to be restrained by the T-Rex because you're inside of its mouth. Yeah, until this grapple ends. So actually, we don't need can only grapple 1 target at a time. It's just we do until this grapple ends. The creature. This grapple ends. The Carrion Crawler cannot bite another target. Bite another target. Okay, great. Yeah, that's pretty simple. So again, if you're thinking like this isn't a huge change to them mechanically, like almost no change. We shrank them, we gave them a little bit more dexterity, some stealth, the burrower trait, and then we changed the bite to be about a grapple. But the main thing is about their tactical difference, right? Like how they fight and what they're after, and that's all stuff that we can put in the lore. So we're gonna save this. I'm gonna view image, all that. That way I have that for later. But that's the new Carrion Crawler. That's pretty simple. So here's what we're gonna do. I want to brainstorm a little bit about other things we could do. But one thing that they talk about in 4th edition, specifically, I believe in the Monster Vault, a product that I have here with me. 4th edition's MO was to basically present a bunch of different types of monster at different levels, and I definitely think at certain times they went overboard with this. But the Monster Vault was a product from D&D Essentials, which was kind of the closest thing to like 4.5. It was them sort of trying to mostly Monster Vault was basically a product to try to beef up a lot of the monsters from the 5th edition Monster Manual, because the Essentials line really almost like overclocked a lot of player characters and made them super powerful. I found that the monsters in the Monster Vault were much more challenging, much more interesting than they were originally printed in the Monster Manual. I think there's this thing where like early monster manuals of the first monster manual of any edition, I think tends to be a little bit timid in terms of what they think they can get away with monster wise. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea because, you know, you're going to get the most new players going to that monster manual, but it also tends to like, it's where I go right away, and then I look at the monster and I'm like, oh, I don't want to run that. It's not very exciting. So Monster Vault is kind of like, it was the last monster product they released for 4th edition, and it's got a bunch of kind of redesigned monsters in it. I believe the Carrion Crawler is in here. I'm going to look like an idiot if it's not. But I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, here it is. Oh, yeah, man. You want to talk about that, like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles art. Like, there you go. I don't know if you can see that, actually. Let me check. Yeah, can you kind of see that? Right? Look at that shit. Like, that looks like it's literally coming out the sewers in New York City in a TMNT comic. Cool. So, but it's even on this page. They so they had a lot of different monsters in here, lots of different versions of different monsters. There are 4 carrion crawlers in here, if you can believe it. There's the carrion crawler Scuttler, who is a level 5 skirmisher, back when monsters had monster types. The carrion crawler, which is a level 7 soldier. The carrion crawler Putrefier, which is a level 15 soldier. And then there is and I kid you not, the enormous carrion crawler is what it's called, which was a huge version of the carrion crawler. And I think the idea here is that it is similar to, like, a lobster, right? And the notion that, like, a carrion crawler will just keep growing and growing and growing and growing, unless it dies, unless it's killed. Like, you know, lobsters get bigger and bigger with age, and they eventually kind of, like, crush themselves under their own body weight. But let's assume that our carrion crawlers do not do that, and instead they just keep getting bigger and bigger like dragons. So I was thinking it might be kind of fun to do an enormous carrion crawler as well as something for our patrons, and to, you know, fill a little time here. Like, I would love to at least get to an hour on this stream. It feels kind of silly if it's like a 20-minute stream. But I want to look at this enormous carrion crawler and see what it has and what we can maybe take from it. Shadowrunner says, different monster manuals try to balance any changes to players or combat economy to maintain challenge. Exactly, right? It's power creep. It's like over the course of the edition, new powers get introduced, and that makes it harder and harder for those low-level monsters to challenge increasingly more powerful characters. Although I found that, like, even the monsters, at least in 4th edition, the monsters in the 4th edition monster manual were not a challenge even for players, like, right out the gate, right? Like, a lot of them are very, very basic, and it kind of became a problem. And I think that can more or less be said for 5th edition, but not as, you know, across the board. So the enormous carrion crawler is level 17, which I think sounds really high, but you have to remember that 4th edition went to level 30 rather than level 20. So you have to kind of, like, take that into account and say, you know, this is more like a level, you know, like 7 to 11 challenge. I think that's kind of where we want to end up with the enormous carrion crawler. Got a bunch of hit points. It's got dark vision. It's got spider climb. It's an elite monster, which means it has an action point, and it's got +2 to its saving throws. Ooh, it has threatening reach. The carrion crawler can make opportunity attacks against enemies within 3 squares of it. All right, I think that's the idea, that its tentacles are that long. It's got the tentacle attack, which can hit someone up to 15 feet away. Ooh, it can pull the target 1 square. I like that. And the target takes ongoing 10 poison damage and is slowed. And the way 4th edition did this is a lot of the the same, like, some of that stuff got carried into 5th edition, right? Like, if you look at the way that the basilisk or the Medusa's petrification works, where it's in stages, that comes from 4th edition. And so the paralysis here comes from that. Or does it that way. But 5th edition is much more brutal and is just like, nope, it's this. They've got a bite attack. They've got an ability called Hungry Assault. So as an action, the carrion crawler uses its tentacles twice, or uses tentacles once and bite once. So basically multi-attack, right? And then they've got a recharge called Tentacle Flurry in a Close Blast 3. They take a bunch of damage, ongoing 10 poison damage, and they're slowed. So basically, like, it whips its tentacles all around and hits everybody near it. That feels a little 4th edition-y to me. I'm not super into it. I do like the pulling. I think that's cool. And I do like the idea of it having, like, a longer reach. But what other kinds of cool... I'm going to look at these other carrion crawlers and see if we can steal any other cool ideas. Oh, we forgot to put the Scuttle ability in. Or Skitter. Oops. We're not done with our carrion crawler. Silly me. I knew we were forgetting something. We forgot about Skitter. So I want to figure out, how do we do this? Oh, Shadowrunner says carrion crawlers can also be prey to other burrowing monsters like Ankegs, Bullets, Umber Hulks, and Purple Worms. That's interesting. Yeah, I definitely think it's true for Bullets and Umber Hulks and Purple Worms, but Ankegs and carrion crawlers are the same CR, right? So they could easily, like, feed on each other. I think that's cool. Okay, so how do we want to do Skitter? I like the idea that it's not just that it can disengage as a bonus action. Like that's I think probably the simplest way to do it, but I want it to feel a little bit more unique to the Carrion Crawler, right? Like that if it bites a target, maybe if it gets a if it lands a grapple or something like that, then it can spend its reaction to move up to half its speed. I like the idea that it doesn't it can still provoke opportunity attacks, but those have like disadvantage or something, right? Because it's like, you know, scampering away. That, like, because you can step. That's the thing with roaches, right? Like they are very fast, but the problem is that you step on one and it doesn't die, right? That it's like it's not a matter of that you can't step on it. It's that won't kill it. So I like the idea of in some way reflecting that as I would like it to be an ability rather than an action, you know. But I'm not sure exactly how to mechanize it because to me it's an escape, right? It's once it has the prey in its jaws, then it needs to like spend its reaction to get out of there. Maybe it's in response to an attack, right? Maybe it's a thing where like the Carrion Crawler can spend its reaction to skitter away from someone, you know, if you miss it. Yeah, I like that. So let's maybe make it a reaction. Boy, if we add a reaction on here. Well, I'll just put it as an ability. The Carrion Crawler, or when missed by a melee attack. When missed by a melee attack, a Carrion Crawler can use its reaction to move up to half its speed. Opportunity attacks made against the crawler have disadvantage. Yeah, there we go. So it's a nice passive ability. Let me move it up because it would technically go above Spider Climb if we're doing like alphabetical shit. There we go. When missed by a melee attack, a Carrion Crawler can use its reaction to move up to half its speed. Opportunity attacks. Ooh, chance attack hits the victim. Ooh, I like that, chat owner. Yeah, when missed by a melee attack, a Carrion Crawler can use its reaction to move up to half its speed. Yeah, if the attack missed by 5 or more. Yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. If the triggering attack missed by 5 or more, the triggering attack missed by 5 or more, it instead targets. Well, the thing is that like, I guess you'd phrase it as this: if the triggering attack misses by 5 or more, it instead hits the grappled target. I kind of think that works. Like, the question, right, is that, like, if you missed the Carrion Crawler, you know what I mean? If you missed it, then presumably you're rolling below a 14. If you miss it by 5 or more, you're rolling below a 9. So if the Carrion Crawler has a fighter grappled, right, in its jaws, and the fighter's wearing full plate, you're trying to tell me that like a 9 hits this fighter in full plate, like they get no benefit from their armor class? Like I kind of think it works because the conceit is that like you were rolling to hit the Carrion Crawler and you missed the Carrion Crawler and instead hit your ally, armor or no, right? Like all attacks, like there are instances where attacks that don't get above 19 hit someone with AC 19, right? I think that still works. Yeah, I think that's cool. Ooh, yeah, that's very flavorful. I dig that. Okay, cool. Let's save that one then. All right, so I want to brainstorm some ideas for our enormous Carrion Crawler. So I like the idea that it's got increased armor class, right? Let's say that this thing is like CR10. So this is a big monster of a Carrion Crawler, right? Increased armor class from thickened like carapace. Thickened carapace, right? It's got a 15-foot reach. It's got oh, I was looking at these other guys. That's why I remember, because it said scuttle. Should say skitter, which I think is a grosser word, but that's fine. Carrion Crawler's Scuttler. It's got Unsettling Scuttle. Ooh. Ooh, maybe we should have read this. So as a move action, the Carrion Crawler shifts up to its speed. So shift in 4th edition meant moved without provoking opportunity attacks. It can move through enemy spaces and climb during the shift. Each time the Carrion Crawler enters an enemy space for the first time during this movement, it makes the following attack against that enemy. +8 versus reflex, the target falls prone. I kind of like that. Also, very absurd though, because this is a large Carrion Crawler. Like they didn't even make the Carrion Crawler Scuttler smaller. They didn't even say it's like small sized. So this is an animal the size of a horse that is moving through your space. I guess the point is that it's knocking you over as opposed to going underneath you, right? I kind of like that it can move through enemy spaces. Is that making it too strong though? Let's do this. Let's get rid of the opportunity attacks made against the crawler have disadvantage. Let's go, like that. And then we're gonna do, use that ability. And then we're gonna do, underfoot. Yeah, I like the mobility too. The Carrion Crawler can move through the spaces, like being checked by a hockey player. Yeah, it's like a horse. That's why I think it's better that ours is a little smaller. Like, it's still medium size. It's still the size of a person, but you have to assume that if it's a bug, it's probably lower to the ground, right? It's more like a dwarf, and it's like skittering around and knocking people over, right? It can move through the other creatures' spaces. Other creatures, the spaces of other creatures, move through the spaces. How do they word it? I gotta stop putting it down. Like, I think I know what it says. Move through enemy spaces. Yeah, the Carrion Crawler can move through. When it moves, the Carrion Crawler. I think just the Carrion Crawler can move through enemy spaces. David says, I've always run them as solo monsters, so extra movement is fun. I agree. Extra movement is always good. Can move through enemy spaces without provoking opportunity attacks. I think you just literally just give them that, right? That like they're too quick. Add ability. It instead hits a we need to change this on Skitter, because it might not have it doesn't actually specify that. When missed by a melee attack, a Carrion Crawler can use its reaction to move to half its speed if the Carrion Crawler has a target grappled. The Carrion Crawler has a creature grappled. And the triggering attack misses by 5 or more, it instead hits the grappled target. Cool, that's better. The Carrion Crawler can move through enemy spaces without provoking opportunity attacks. When it does, the target the creature must make. Well, actually, we'll say other creature spaces, because I think enemy is a term that's more 4th edition. Other creature spaces. That's probably what it does. The creature must make a DC 11. We'll say DC 11 dexterity. It's usually strength to avoid knocking you prone, right? Strength saving throw, or fall prone, or be knocked prone, Okay, that's a lot. That's got to be enough for the Carrion Crawler. Yeah, we might. You know what? Let's combine Burrower and Underfoot, because I don't think those actually have to be two separate abilities. Let's just do this. Kill that, and then go... Yeah. There we go. That's a little cleaner. We do that? Yeah, there we go. Cool. So it's got Keen Smell, Skitter, Spider Climb, and Underfoot. Can move through a space narrow enough for a small creature without squeezing. The Carrion Crawler can also move through other creature spaces without provoking opportunities. Put an also in there. Can also move through other creature spaces without provoking opportunity attacks. When it does, the creature must make a DC 11 strength saving throw or be knocked prone. Yeah, I think that works. Cool. Shatter says, yeah, phrase like that, it ignores Sentinel. I actually don't know the wording on Sentinel. I'm gonna look it up. Is that good that it ignores Sentinel? I've never had a... I know people sometimes have a problem with that one. I've never had that. I don't do a lot of feats in my games. Use your reaction to make a melee. Creatures evoke opportunity attacks even if they take the disengage action. Oh, yeah. So that's good that it avoids Sentinel. Yeah, so the Carrion Crawler just does not provoke opportunity attacks when he moves. Or when it moves. I kind of think that's cool. You know, that gives it a unique thing. Great. Okay, back to brainstorming the enormous Carrion Crawler. So we were looking at these guys. I don't think this dude's got Scuttle. I think it's too big to have it, so we can take that out of there. Still got the bite, it's still got tentacles, all that stuff. Ooh, this one's got the Carrion Crawler Putrefier. Ugh, has a nauseous stench. An enemy that starts to turn in the aura takes 5 poison damage and is slowed. Rotting tentacles. Yuck, don't like that. Okay, yeah, I like a nauseous stench. I mean, I don't, but I like it from my Carrion Crawler monster. I don't know that I want it. This has to be poison damage, and I think it's like... I kind of like the idea that it's like a control thing, and it's more about like gagging, right? Like is it Cloud Kill, which is the one that makes you, or Stinking Cloud, similar to Stinking Cloud, forces you to stop and retch. So the enormous Carrion Crawler, like, ostensibly... Ooh, Carrion Guardian, that's cool. The Carrion Crawler ostensibly is still doing the same stuff, right? Like, it's still grabbing you and trying to... Well, it's still trying to eat flesh. Rotted flesh. Maybe we do a thing where, like, it deals necrotic damage? Like, it rots you? Yeah, I kind of think that's cool. Acid Spit is good. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so let's do a thing where, like, nauseous stench, or like necrotic stench or something. Like, I like the idea that it maybe it's the, rather than acid spit, I like the idea of spit, but like, if the point that the Carrion Crawler has to, like, you have to be rotted for it to eat, maybe the enormous Carrion Crawler has figured out a way to, like, like, necrotize you faster, right? So, like, yeah, troglodytes have the stink too, that's true. Necrotic. I just put necrotic damage. Like, it's trying to necrotize you faster if a creature is reduced to 0 hit points by the necrotic damage. They die. I like an acid spit. Yeah, they have a large amount of battlefield control. So nauseous stench, I think, is fine. Kind of like similar to Stinking Cloud. Predigestion. Ooh, that's good. Yeah, predigestion. Yuck. Similar to Stinking Cloud. Forces you to stop and gag. Like, I think the combination here of increased reach, thickened carapace, the, like, noxious stench aura, dealing necrotic damage instead of poison damage, and then like a recharge acid spit. Recharge necrotic spit that potentially like immobilizes the prey, right? That it's gunky. Replace poison damage on tentacle with necrotic damage, and then having a power called Predigestion, and that's if necrotic creatures reduced by 0 hit points by the Carrion Crawler's necrotic damage, they die. Yeah, that's cool. You could, if you really want to do it, you could also have a thing where, like, maybe this is just in the lore, but, you know, like 1 out of every 10, you know, corpses the Carrion Crawler kills, they impregnate with eggs. Because that's the thing they mention in the lore, that they lay their eggs in carrion. So, you know, it's probably not something you would want in the stat block, but I kind of like that in the lore, you know. That feels like plenty, right? Because it'll still be huge, and it'll have multi-attack, right? And we can probably even give it like multiple tentacle hits, right? Like it could go 4 tentacle attacks and a bite, you know, something really nasty. And basically it's a solo monster, right? It's a big fucking mama Carrion Crawler. Yeah, I kind of think that's cool. I think it might be nice to have a simpler monster. I mean, obviously this is a pretty complex one, but like in the past we've done like, you know, the gelatinous cube one we just did is very complex. It's like 5 different types of cubes, and then it's got a table in there as well. Like I think just like Nuker Wolf says maybe a crit may also get a lingering injury. I kind of like that. Yeah, or like a disease. Yeah, we got to put filth fever back in there, right? Welcome, Nuker Wolf. We're just about to wrap up, I think, but welcome. Perhaps the target contracts filth fever on a critical hit. Something like that's kind of cool. I mean, we could honestly just put that right in the bite, right? Like the mouth is just like a culture for some of the worst bacteria in the world. Yeah, I think that's cool. But I think it's nice to maybe have a slightly simpler one. We'll have like the standard, or like our new version of the Carrion Crawler, right? And then we'll have the enormous Carrion Crawler. And I do kind of like calling it the enormous Carrion Crawler. There's something like very charming about how like exactly what it says on the tin that is, you know. It's a really big Carrion Crawler, you guys. Yeah, I kind of think that's it, everybody. I don't know that there's much else to do, you know. I think that's kind of everything. It's like I say, it's a very simple monster. So I feel like, let's put some immunities in here too. I think it's got necrotic, acid, and poison immunity. Immune to necrotic, poison, and acid. I think its speed is slow, right? I think it's like speed is lower than standard Carrion Crawler. Can't spider climb. It's like too big, you know? I'm imagining like a horrible fucking like egg sac thing, you know, on the back, like a termite queen. Gross. Yuck. Okay, I mean, you could call it a carrion queen. Yeah, look, the snake. Yeah, exactly. What is it called? The extremely deadly viper? It's called something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's slower. Could call it Norse Carrion Crawler. I might call it Carrion Queen. Carrion Queen. That's right, yeah, because it's actually very friendly. Enormous Carrion Crawler. Yeah, guys, I think that's gonna be it for the Carrion Crawler. Yeah, I'm into it. I think in my world, I would substitute out Filth Fever for Black Bloat, which is a kind of a disease I have in my homebrew world that is a particularly nasty disease that's kind of like found in stagnant water. And and it kind of necrotizes you from the inside out. It's particularly bad, kind of like a magical necrotic version of Ebola. And in my homebrew world, I would probably replace it with Black Bloat, but I think in the context of Dungeons and Dragons, Filth Fever is probably the one you're looking for there. Sorry for the shorter stream today, guys, but I think that brings us to the end. We have 2 versions of the Carrion Crawler now. We have our new version. Let's go through what it has. It's got Skitter, right? Ooh, the old Brood Matron, yeah. It's got Skitter, where the Carrion... Oh, first of all, it's smaller. It's got better dexterity. It's got training and stealth. It's got an ability, when it's missed by a melee attack, a Carrion Crawler can use its reaction to move up to half its speed. If the Carrion Crawler has a creature grappled and the triggering attack misses by 5 or more, it instead hits the grappled target. It's got an ability called Underfoot. The Carrion Crawler can move through a space narrow enough for a small creature without squeezing, and it can also move through other creature spaces without provoking opportunity attacks. When it does, the creature must make a DC 11 strength saving throw, or be knocked prone. And then, in addition, its bite attack has a grapple feature, which allows it to basically bite and then drag its prey with it. Cool. In addition, we brainstormed some ideas for our enormous Carrion Crawler. CR 10, increased armor class, 15-foot reach. It's slower, it can't do spider climb, it's immune to necrotic poison and acid. It's got like a noxious, let's put noxious scent. Rather than nauseous, because I definitely didn't spell that right. That's similar to a stinking cloud and an aura around it that forces you to stop and gag. It deals necrotic damage instead of poison damage on its tentacles. And then it's got a power called Predigestion. If a creature is reduced to 0 hit points by the Carrion's necrotic damage, it dies. And that flavor-wise, 1 out of every 10 corpses the Carrion Crawler kills, they immediately impregnate with eggs. It also has a recharge acid spit, where it spits this necrotic fluid that potentially immobilizes or slows down the prey. And potentially on a crit, it can also the target can contract Filth Fever. That might just be like on its bite, like its bite has Filth Fever in it. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Great, nice work, everybody. That is the Carrion Crawler. I appreciate you coming out. I know this is kind of a short one, a little under an hour there, but that is okay. We will be back on Saturday with a Sea of Thieves stream at 5 p.m. PST. And then we should also be here on Sunday for a world building stream, though I'm not sure what we're going to world build quite yet. I haven't thought about that too much. I'll have to figure it out. One of these days, I want to do a dwarven alphabet. I want to do the runes, right? The Novmeksul in dwarven, which I think is like black letter writing. I think black letter speech. Anyway, but I want to do a stream that's like coming up with what the different runes are, because I know there's a couple of, obviously Futhark exists, but there's also the Dethic runes that they did for, I think, 4th edition. And you have to like, do I use those? Do I modify those? Do I make up my own? That could be a cool world building stream at some point. Anyway, we're off topic. If you like the content that I make, please check out my YouTube channel here. You can subscribe, like the video, helps more people see it. All the YouTube things insert here. If you like this particular kind of channel, or this particular kind of video, we have a whole bunch of them on the channel. You can go back and see a whole bunch of monsters going all the way back to the bees that we've done similar treatments to. You can listen to the podcast, got Monster of the Week. Check it out right up here above me. It's got an even deeper dive into a lot of these different monsters and their histories. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at ProDMTimothy. We have a Discord. We have a Patreon, which I've mentioned before. But if you join the Patreon at the $1 level, you get access to these monster stat blocks that you can download and use in your own games. Usually those blocks come with a little bit of extra juice. So, for example, the Carrion Queen will be, actually made and synthesized. And you can use that in your campaign. Shadowner says the Iron language has been reforged over the ages. That's cool. You can check that out there. I think that's everything. Oh, yes, I should say about Saturday's stream. I was, before I was doing like a simulcast thing onto both YouTube and Twitch, but like the picture quality gets really bad when you do that. So I think I'm going to stick with the gaming streams on Twitch. I'll definitely post about it, and then I'll usually will take a highlight from that and post it back over here. So you'll still see the highlight if you don't catch the stream live, but we will be migrating over to Twitch, which is twitch.tv/ProDMTimothy is where we have all of our stuff over there. Okay, great. I think all of that out of the way. Thank you so much for coming and watching. A shout out to David and Shadowner and Nuker Wolf. Oh, and Grant too. Grant was here in the beginning. That's right. I appreciate everybody coming out and helping me with this quick and dirty little monster redesign. When we come back next week, we'll be doing the Centaur, which I just recorded and edited that today. So that should be going out to patrons tomorrow and to the general public on Sunday. So go ahead and check that one out. That's going to be an interesting one, too, because whenever we do these, like, monstrous humanoid ones, they're always a little bit different, right? Because the stats are always just like, hey, it has multi-attack. The end. There's not really anything else going on. So we'll definitely be doing a couple of variants on the Centaur, I believe. But I don't want to spoil it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys soon. Until then, happy adventure. Okay, I gotta turn off my camera. We do audio first.